right, Tansei, hello, and welcome to the Matriarch Movement podcast. I'm your host, Shayla Ouellette Stonechild, and I'm super excited to have Lauren Goodday here with me today. She's a multi-award-winning artist and fashion designer, and you may have seen her work in numerous art shows such as the Santa Fe Indian Market, the Herd Guild Museum Market, and she's earned numerous first place awards in beadwork, traditional arts, and textiles. Her work has also been featured in Vogue, InStyle, and the New York Times. She has a passion for promoting Indigenous arts and culture, and Lauren creates innovative designs while honoring her people's traditions. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Indigenous Studies from the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, and she remains deeply involved in her cultural life, including language revitalization and taking part in her traditional ceremonies. I'm actually wearing her designs here today, and I had the pleasure of meeting Lauren in person for this past Santa Fe Indian Market. I ended up getting a few of your designs, so thank you so much. I feel like so beautiful in them. For those of you who can't see, I'm wearing like a buffalo dress, and Lauren's also got some buffaloes on here today, so we're matching. But Lauren, thank you so much. If you just want to introduce yourself, where you're from, thank you for being here.
Noah, hello. My name is Lauren Goodday. I am Marikara Hidatsa from the Fort Berthold Reservation in North Dakota on my mother's side, and I'm also Blackfeet and Plains Cree from Saskatchewan, Canada. So I am registered up in Canada as well. My late father, he grew up between Browning and Sweetgrass Reserve. So, I grew up here in North Dakota, and as you said in that wonderful introduction, I'm an artist, designer, and an entrepreneur, and also my most important job is I'm a mother. So I feel like this is a wonderful opportunity and an amazing platform to be on talking about matriarchy.
Yes. And to kick us off, like I know matriarchy can mean different things to different Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people, depending on which tribe or nation that they come from. But I'm curious from your perspective, having a few lineages, like what does the word matriarch mean to you?
So I was raised here in North Dakota, where I continue to live amongst my mother's people. Our people are Earth Ledge dwellers, and we're Rikra Hiradza, and our women are literal the matriarchs. So our lineage, we're matrilineal. So our lineage is actually traveled through down the mother's line. So I am a Rikra Hiradza because that is what my mother is, and her mother, and her mother, and her mother from the beginning of time. So I feel like the role of a woman and the role of being a matriarch for our people is so important because, we're leaders, we're decision makers. We have so much influence over our community and our children, and we're the ones that create and make the children and we raise them. So I feel like it's a role that I've taken very seriously throughout my life. And it's something that I hold very close to me because growing up, knowing the importance of a young girl into womanhood and how important my life would be is what I took very serious.
So, like I had mentioned in the introduction, you wear a lot of hats. You're an award winning fashion designer, an artist, you work with different textiles, and you're also a mother. And so, I know all these things. You didn't just wake up and you were in all these roles. So, like, the first question is, where were you inspired by fashion? Like, is that something you've always had? Where did your love for fashion really begin?
I feel like, going back to how I was raised and, coming from a matrilineal culture. So for our people and in many other Indigenous cultures, we have gender roles. And one of the gender roles for our people is if you're a woman, you create for your family. And that's one of the ways that we're taught to show love for our family. So when I was younger, I had my mother and my grandmother. When I was a little girl, we would go to powwows and they would make outfits for me. My grandmother was the family moccasin maker, and my mother would make my dance regalia. So seeing them create so often and so much and always having a project going on. And that was the role of a woman, was to create for the family. So I seen that and I naturally gravitated and mimicked what they would do. So I'd see my grandmother always working on a pair of moccasins. Someone always needed moccasins. Or my mom working on a new jingle dress or fancy shawl outfit for our next celebration. And I seen them, and then one day I was 13 and I just wanted to try it out. And my mom, she actually traveled a lot. She was the North Dakota Indian Affairs Commissioner. So she was, this cultural, traditional woman, but she was also a working professional. So she was gone away on a trip and I was 13. Me and my sister was, I believe, around 18 at the time. So we were home and my auntie would come over to check on us. But I got so inspired one day. I was like, I'm gonna try to make my own outfit. And so like we had everything we needed. We had the sewing machine, we had all the fabric, and my mom had been creating for so long that I just tried it out one day. And of course my first work was not that great. I wish I could find that shawl that I created. But it's really cool to see the progression of where I had started, just being an inspired young woman at 13 into where I've come today. And, all the tips and tricks and everything I've learned along the way was just from working at it so much. So a lot of people will be like, well, how did you learn this? It's like, well, I learned it from seeing first, and then I got inspired. And then I figured out new ways and new techniques to add into my artwork. So it's just something that, came natural to me as a woman, and us seeing what was in front of me, seeing what my mother and what my aunties and what my grandmothers did. I remember my grandmother, she'd be with all of her sisters and they would create star quilts and they'd all be quilting together. So it was really cool. Like even then, my grandfather was a very cultural Herads man, and for our people, you have to have the right to create a lot of things. You have to have the right to do feather work and quill work. And so my grandfather was really recognized within our community as a war bonnet maker. And so he'd be working on these war bonnets when I'd go visit their house in the country, and just seeing like how productive my grandparents were and seeing how industrious our people are taught to be. Like we're never supposed to be bored, in Indigenous culture. So there's always something to do. So I knew that I should always be working on something. And that's even how I am today. If I'm going to sit down and I want to watch a show, I'm going to be doing a drawing, or I'm going to be beading, or I'm going to be creating something. So I just feel like it was a natural transition, um, taking our cultural art that I was raised to do, and then kind of finding a segue into, well, how can I share my gifts and talents with the world? And so I became a professional artist. Even before I actually tried it out, when I was younger, around 7 or 8, I would draw pow outfits. I'd draw regalia. And it'd be funny because you'd see my little notebooks and I'd have like little fancy shawl outfits in there and how I would draw them. And so I feel like it all kind of came about together, my journey into art, my journey into womanhood, and my journey into being a fashion designer. And they all went hand in hand.
I was gonna say that's beautiful. It's like almost like it was passed down literally through your bloodline to create art, and through your grandmothers and your mom and through the matriarchs.
Mhm.
And that's like so beautiful because not often do you really hear that. You hear a lot of people, maybe finding out about their passion when they go to school or attend different programs, and they're always looking for something. But for you, it seems like your family and the generations before you really instilled creativity and also respect. And that was my next question, is around respect. You mentioned a little bit about how you have to have the rights to be making certain things, whether it's war bonnets or whether it's regalia. I'm interested to know what goes into dreaming up your next collection. And before we get into that question, could you tell listeners a little bit about Lauren Goodday, the brand itself, for those that are listening that may not know what Lauren Goodday, the brand, is all about?
Yeah. So, like I said, I started out as a professional artist. So, actually, all of my 20s, I'm actually 37 now, but all of my 20s, I was a professional artist, and I traveled to all the juried Native American art shows. So, I feel like the art shows have many of the best Native American Indigenous artists there. The level of art is just amazing. And I feel like seeing the amazing artists that are there inspired me, to get my art at a certain level. My first Santa Fe Indian Market that I did, and that's a prestigious art show because you have to apply to get in, and not everyone gets in. People try for many years, but the first time I applied, I got in, and I believe I was 19. And so, I had never even been there before. But my mom, she was actually my main encourager. She's actually the one that encouraged me to go to art school too. Um, and I tell this to a lot of people, I feel like I barely got out of high school. Like I just barely did enough work so that I could pass, I could graduate. But my mother seen that I had a talent and a skill for art, and she wanted to encourage me to do something that I love and something that I would stick to. And so she said, "Why don't you go to art school?" So she helped me apply for the Institute of American Indian Arts. I got there. I was many miles away from home, and I was kind of like, I don't know. I didn't really do too well in high school, but when I got there, like I had started in the art program, realized it was a real traditional formal art training, and my art is very cultural. So I actually switched over to Indigenous studies. But while I was there, I I took Indigenous studies and I really focused on the aesthetic culture of Arikaras and the Hirazas, and the trends when we got different materials, the advent of different things within our culture that changed the way that our aesthetic culture looks. So I did many years studying, talking to elders, going to museums, looking at our pieces, and that's when I went to Santa Fe. So I was there and I actually really excelled. By the time I was done within the 4 years, I graduated with high honors. So it's so crazy. You see like this young kid that barely got out of high school, going through a mainstream education and then going to something that is culturally relevant and culturally focused with the Indigenous studies. And I did really well. But I just realized I took you on like a whole journey about my education. But
No,
back,
that's important to know,
yeah.
especially like you put yourself in two environments. One was more mainstream. You realized that didn't work for you, and you started to thrive in one that's connected to your culture. So that
Yeah.
makes complete sense. And that's a part of your brand too.
Yeah.
That's why you have such an established and respectful brand. And so to get back to I think where you're headed is, yeah, like what is Lauren Goodday's brand all about? And what do you also like provide?
So, I guess the brand itself, I started out as a professional artist, and for many years, I sold original pieces. I sold pieces like this original ledger drawing. I sold, beaded moccasins, beaded bags, and those pieces take months to do. The more intense, with beaded items take so much time to do. Ledger drawings, they are less time, but they still take a good amount of time. And this piece right here actually sold for 10,000. So the thing is that my work that I could do in my 20s, I'm only one person
Mhm.
and I can only produce so much so fast. So I wanted to figure out a way that I could share my art and make my art accessible to a greater audience that included a lot of Native people. So the reason why I create art is because I feel that there's so much value within our artwork, and there's so much storytelling. It holds our teachings. It holds, our stories about who we are, where we come from, and what we believe. So I felt like it was so important to continue on our art ways, and I wanted to be able to share that with a greater audience, including my own people. So I started creating prints of my original drawings, and then I was like, well, how can I take beadwork and how can I reproduce that? Like, how can I share that? So I thought like, oh, I could make like a t-shirt with this. So it did take some research and I did have it came full circle eventually, but it took a lot of research into manufacturing and going down this way of becoming an entrepreneur. And I've spent literally months of my life, finding these different ways to that I can apply my art in different things. So I feel like one way that I figured out to share my artwork was to be able to create the wearable. I have a rack right here that you can't see, but create prints and patterns with my artwork to be able to share with a greater audience. But I feel like, everything that I create does have a story. There is cultural significance. Like you look at the shirts that we're wearing with the buffalo, there are great significance. A lot of our plains culture and even outside of the plains region, we survived off of buffalo. We have songs, stories, we have people named after buffaloes. Our ceremonies are around them. So I feel like I create things that a lot of Indigenous people can relate to, they find themselves in, and it's even a daily reminder of what's important for our people. So I just
Mhm.
feel like my artwork and what I create with my wearable art is a way to share with Native people and also non-Native people, because I do feel that the cross-cultural education about the original people of the land is very important. And I feel representation um, is important. It's important that people see us and they recognize us. It's important that we see us and we recognize us in our daily lives, from everything, from our language, from clothing, everything. I believe the artwork is important. So I just feel like my artwork is based on authenticity and sharing positive representation with the world.
Mhm. Well, and you can definitely see that in the campaigns and in the pieces that you create. All of your campaigns have Indigenous models and voices represented of all sizes. And I love that there's more to the piece than just, it's not just a buffalo. Like you're saying, there's a history there, there's a connection there, there's connection to spirit as well. And so I'm wondering what your process looks like when dreaming up the next collection, because I feel like when Indigenous designers are designing, it is a spiritual practice. It's not like you're just threading a needle and some clothing together. There's a generation there, there's teachings there, and like you had mentioned, sometimes there's protocol and rights and responsibilities there. And so what does that look like when you're dreaming up your next collection?
So whenever I'm working on a collection, I usually base it around a theme, something that I want to highlight, something or a teaching or an animal that I want to bring awareness to, that I want to honor with my work. And so it all starts out with a ledger drawing. I was looking for the ledger drawings. I have my ledger pieces over here,
Could you
but
explain what a ledger drawing is for those
yeah.
that don't know what it is?
So this piece here, if you can look, you can see the lined paper. So this is called ledger art because it's done on ledger paper. And this is actually an art form that came from adaptation and survival. So historically, as Indigenous people, we used to do pictographs, and it could be on rock walls. Later, it would turn into buffalo robes or deer hides. We would tell our stories as a way to record them through pictorial art. So what I wanted to do and what I feel our ancestors did is that when the non-native people came to our lands, we were put on reservations and we no longer had access to a lot of the hides that we would paint our stories on, with the winter counts and the buffalo robes that had, details of our history. So we wanted to continue telling our stories in pictorial form like we have always done. And so we used the paper from military forts or general stores that were around us to continue telling our stories. So ledger art, it was historically a male art form, and they would tell their stories of war, battle, and hunting, things that are more masculine in nature. But what I did with ledger art, being a female ledger artist, is I told the stories of women. So my work focuses on women, children, families, courtship, and things that are tied to us ceremonially, like the buffalo. So I feel what I do is I really show the more feminine aspects in life with ledger art. So how I got started with ledger art was I come from a historical ledger artist. His name was Bloody Knife. His work is actually part of the National Museum of American Indian Smithsonian. And so I wanted to continue on this storytelling ways. And it was, of course, by my mother who encouraged me. And I feel like a lot of people are always like, whoa, your mom encouraged you. A lot of people don't encourage their children to be artists, because they always talk about a starving artist. But I feel like there's a value and there's a teaching in that, encouraging your children with what their skills are. I wasn't great in mainstream academia when I went to a regular high school here in North Dakota. But when I went and I focused on something that I loved within Indigenous culture, and, really focusing on who we are as a people and our history and the advent of different materials to our people in our art, is when I really excelled. So I feel I'm going off again.
No, this is also important. And I know there's a lot of young Indigenous listeners that are listening
Mhm.
to this, probably feeling so inspired. So it's okay.
Yeah. So, it all really just comes full circle. I feel that my artwork and, who I am as a person, it really came full circle back into the design and, carrying on the traditions of our people. That is one of the most important things to me, is to be able to, keep who we are, keep our values, our traditions, our stories, our language, and our aesthetic culture. So that's why I created prints and patterns with the ledger art. That's why I do the beadwork. And I do it to continue it on to the future generations.
And so each collection starts with the ledger art. And so when you're formatting it, do you just start like freestyling? But like you said, you come up with a theme. Let's say you want to talk about buffalo, then you go to the ledger art. And then what does that process look like from there?
Yeah, so the focus is, a lot of times do have or do deal with ledger art. Sometimes I create beadwork patterns as well. I'll focus on like a certain color palette. So I feel like I go bold a lot, bold, bright colors with a lot of my work. And I feel like I do that because a lot of our ancestors love bold and bright. We used whatever we could get our hands on. And when we had the advent of beads, we're like, okay, we'll take this bead and let's get all the colors of beads. When we got crayons and access to pens and pencils, it's like, okay, let's add these into our drawings. So I feel like using the bright and bold colors is usually what I do. But with this collection that I did this past summer, I was like, I want to do something that's a little more neutral, something a little more muted. It was almost a challenge to myself because I'm So I gravitate towards really bright colors. And so I just went with something that was a little challenging, something that I know a lot of people would be able to wear comfortably around. And I just focus on different colorways.
Yeah, no, I love the recent collection. It's the one that I'm wearing, right? Like the lighter
Yeah.
tones and everything? Yeah. Yeah, no, I love the lighter tones. And I love how you it sounds like you, in your earlier life, you were in an environment where you got inspired. And so, whether you're at a museum or whether you're in school or whether you're in your family, and so now that inspiration continues to follow you throughout each one of these collections. Is there
Mhm.
a specific collection that you're like, this was hands down like one of my favorite collections to work on?
I feel like every collection, I feel like that. I'm
That's
like, oh,
good.
so awesome. I love what this teaches. I love these colors. Then it comes out and I'm like, oh, that was good. And then I do the next one. I was like, oh, I'm so excited about this. So I'm very confident in like what I produce and what I put out there. At the same time, like I have so many ideas. Like I kind of have to like bring myself back. Like I'm like, I created so much with this collection. So what we're wearing is from the Rome collection, ROAM, like Buffalo Rome. And I created so much that I had so many pieces. I sampled so many pieces when I finally, was like, okay, I got to make some decisions. So I came out with the second collection, which actually dropped today on my website.
Oh,
Learn,
right.
and it's Rome too. So it's the rest of the pieces that didn't make the first cut, still equally beautiful. But I just felt like the first release kind of went together with the color palette, and then the second release was heavily based on like Parfleche. So and then I added a new print with the plaid. So I feel like a lot of times I really I have so many ideas and I have so many things that I'm doing. I have to cut
Well,
back a bit.
no, I totally understand that. I'm the same way too. And oftentimes we aren't seeing what's happening behind the scenes. And so I'm curious, like, do you have a team for Lauren Goodday? Like, what does that look like? What does your everyday look like? I'm sure it's
Yeah.
different depending on the day, but do you have a team that helps you? Because I know.
Yeah, a very small team. I feel like a lot of people think like I'll get emails and they think like we're this huge company, but it's literally me doing all the artwork, prints and patterns, working with the manufacturers. I do answer some customer service emails, but probably about a year and a half ago, I brought on my cousin, and she
Oh,
has been
nice.
so amazing. So she's everything to me. I always call her my right hand lady. She's my sounding board. She's my personal assistant. She's customer service, and I think what really I feel like elevated the brand was she's a photographer, and
I was going to ask.
she's very creative in her own aspects. So like she knows the angles, she knows what to put in certain areas to kind of balance it. She knows colorways. And I'm very creative like that as well, but we're cousins. So I mean, I think we're right in the family. But so it's me, Debbie, and also my partner Bryce does all the packaging. And it's just us three.
Wow. Wow. That's actually insane. Like but
I
I think
create
it's
all my own social media too.
oh my gosh.
The post, and my cousin does reply to people, and like we try to keep an eye on like the instant messenger, but I wear a lot of hats, and I'm also a mother.
I
So
know, on top of everything. I'm like, well,
yeah,
thank you for being here because I know
yeah,
you're giving us a little bit of your time today. And I know oftentimes on social media, we see those beautiful photos, we see the aesthetic, we see your drive, but I know that this didn't happen overnight. And so, could you speak
mhm.
to maybe a little bit of the challenges that you faced as an Indigenous entrepreneur?
Yeah, being an entrepreneur has been a journey, and I always say this, that I'm a first generation entrepreneur. My mother, she was a professional, she was highly educated, but she wasn't an entrepreneur, especially in the aspect of dealing with social media. And
Hmm.
so it's been a journey. I've learned a lot, even when it comes to managing money, and also, making sure that I'm investing into the business, investing into the future, and making sure that I'm filing those taxes. That was a journey at first. So it did take me some figuring out. Luckily, I guess it was a transition when I was a professional artist. So I knew like I had to categorize and write off certain things. So I learned that along the way. But when I got to the clothing, it's so much more. There's so much more expenses. There's so much more things that I have to be able to figure out where things go. So I've made some mistakes along the way, hard lessons, but I feel like I have a pretty good grip. And it's also, finding people that can help you, people that you trust. So I do have a CPA that like helps me along the way. And if I have questions like, oh, well, what do I do with this? How do I go about this business aspect? How do we categorize this? So they're a sounding board for me as well. So that's another person that I guess part of the team and helping me figure things out. But it has been a journey along the way. But even when it comes to like marketing, like I feel like my entire business is social media.
Mhm.
That's how people find me. That's how they know the launches, even through social media, how they join the email list, and when I um, put out new collections through the email. So I feel like learning that and learning how it went, like how to get on people's algorithms. Like people ask me all the time, like, how did you grow your following? It's like because I tried.
Yeah.
Like be consistent. I made sure to post. I made sure, the photos were nice. I looked up the algorithm at the time, what's going to put me on the For You page. And so, like, it does take a lot of research. So, yeah, I'm an artist and I feel like what I'm sharing is so important, but also to be able to get my message out there, to be able to get my art out there. It's been a journey, learning,
Mhm.
learning social media, learning, um, even some aspects photography. My cousin is a photographer, but learning, like balance, creating color balance within, what we're setting up. It did take time learning the finances of it. That took time as well. And I don't know everything, but I'm trying and I'm not going to give up.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and I think it stems from really knowing who you are too. I think because you know your pieces, you know who you are, you know where you come from, you know what you stand
Yeah.
for, that can be seen regardless of what photo you post or regardless like what you create is you can see the integrity in your work and it's like you know who you are and I think that's what
Yeah.
people gravitate towards. And I know there's a lot of young indigenous entrepreneurs that listen to this podcast and for someone that may be just starting out that wants to get into fashion, like what would your advice be to the younger group of Indigenous entrepreneurs?
My advice to young Indigenous entrepreneurs would be to find your authentic self. Find your aesthetic, find what's important to you and your people and your community, and work hard. Be tenacious. Not everything works out. There's been many a times that I've made mistakes along my journey. Maybe I thought one product was going to do better than another product and it didn't sell so well, but I figured out ways, I need to get this product sold so that I can invest in the next one. And so that's part of the reason why I love my clothing. I wear it. I basically like my dream wardrobe. But I mean, that's one of the ways why I post my outfits. Like, this is how I would personally style it. And then they'll see somebody that isn't like a super small, body type, like I got curves. And so they'll see the way that I wear the clothing and they'll be inspired by that. Like, oh, I can rock that. I can wear that. That's how I'm going to style it too. So, I mean, being authentic, doing your research, and not giving up. Like don't copy what you see as successful out there. Be your own person. Find your own aesthetic. Find your own ways of doing things because in the end, you know, you'll never run out of your own ideas. But eventually, if you're trying to be somebody else, you're going to run up on some hiccups there. So I feel like just always be authentic to who you are. And I feel that you can't go wrong following your culture. You can't go wrong following, what your people and what your values are. One thing that I feel like it is really important, and I feel like I don't focus on this enough because it's just my life. But I've been drug and alcohol free my entire life, and I feel like there's so many blessings that I've gotten from staying away from those negative things in my life. You know, so my even as a young girl and as a young woman, my weekends weren't filled with going out. My weekends were filled with I'd stay home and beat. I'd work on our powwow regalia for the next powwow, and so like there's so much time that we can focus on what our passions are in life. And I feel like that's something that I really did is I focused on what brought me happiness, what brought me joy, because I feel like there's so much like physical therapy within actually creating and being able to focus on something that you love. And so that I just feel like it really did, um, being authentic to who I was, what I liked, and being a positive person and staying away from the nonsense also has been my life.
It reminds me of something that my mom actually said when I was going through my own phase of like maybe feeling disconnected to who I was and overwhelmed with what other people were doing, and maybe someone was copying me. And she was like, Shayla, at the end of the day, no one can copy you if you're working through spirit and if you're connecting to spirit. Like people can't copy that connection, that spiritual connection that you have to creator and to yourself and to ceremony. And so I love that you have that within all the work that you are doing. You've had that connection to spirit throughout your entire career. And I think that's something that can be felt whether you're Indigenous or non Indigenous. And I know we have non Indigenous listeners probably listening to this right now. And what would you say non Indigenous people can do to support Indigenous fashion and to support this next wave of Indigenous futurism?
Yeah, definitely. That's one of my biggest questions that I get all the time. I'll get non-native people asking, is it okay if I buy your work and I wear it? And I say, yes, absolutely, because, you know, appreciating artwork and knowing the history of it, knowing where it comes from, knowing the artist who created it and purchasing from an authentic native artist is cultural appreciation. And so, everything that I create and everything that I sell, um, and everything that will be on social media or my website that's available is culturally appropriate for everyone to wear. I would never sell anything or create anything that holds deep spiritual value. Even though, yes, a bison is spiritual to our people, I wouldn't like sell an item that we would use in ceremony, you know? So,
Mhm.
I mean, there is a balance and there is a line, but everything that I create is available for everyone to wear and everyone to find beauty in. So it is cultural appreciation when non-native people, are moved by my work. They love the story of the work and they want to buy a print of my art. They want to buy a shirt with it, with my drawing on it. So I would
It
say go.
was It was really cool to see at your market for the Santa Fe Indian Market. Your booth was filled with like literally Indigenous, non Indigenous people. There are so many
Mhm.
at Lauren's booth. And when you think of the future of Indigenous fashion, like what do you hope to see within Indigenous fashion?
Yeah, I feel like our people are natural creators. We're natural artists. It's not just me, it's so many people that have, we have these beadworkers in their family, we have storytellers, we have performing artists in our family. And I feel like there's such a big wave for it right now. And I feel that it's very trendy, but I also feel that it is deeply culturally rooted. And I think there's room for all of us. There's room for all of us. There's room for us all to find, our own aspects of what we're trying to tell, our own niche and our own style. So I'm excited for it. And
Same.
there are so many talented people out there in all aspects, including you. So thank you so much for having me on here.
Oh, yeah. No, I was going to ask you, like, who are you currently inspired by?
Um, well, first and foremost, I would say my children. Um, Recently I came out with the Lauren Goodday Kids collection, and that came from my children always working around me. Even today we were a little bit confused at our time frame. I was like, "Oh, my sitter's not here," which is my mom. Wasn't here yet because I had that 2 p.m. Central Time. I'm here in North Dakota. So, but my children, they're always around while I work. They're here, like right over here. I have my station where I do my ledger art. Right over there is my sewing machine. I have my cutting board over here. I have my dress forms over here. And so, like, my children, they just play while I work. So I'm so inspired by them and to create for them. And they're along with me on the journey. Whether they're playing on their iPads, they bring down their dolls, or they're running around the house. But like, I'm always creating around them. And so they see the original artwork. And then they're like, I want to wear something. And of course, I really focused on like women's and adult clothing. And so I was like, well, I'll make you something. So I was inspired by them to create the children's line and the children's collection. And I feel like they are my greatest inspiration because why I create is to continue on my artwork and continue on the artwork of our people for them.
Mhm. Yeah, through the next generation. Well, it sounds like you're healing so much within your own family and within your own bloodline, but you're also spreading that healing and that good energy to communities and nations and people across the world. Where can people support you? Where can they find you? Where can they follow you? And when's your next collection? Oh, it dropped today.
Today. You guys can find me on social media. It's just at Lauren Goodday. I'm on Instagram, Facebook. I've done a little bit of TikTok, not so much, but a little bit. And my website is just laurengoodday.com. I do one major show, which is the Santa Fe Indian Market every August. Other than that, I try to keep everyone updated on what projects I have going on through my social media.
And there's 4 collections a year, correct, that you drop?
Yeah, some years it's been 3. It depends on
Okay.
what I can get out. Like I said, it's just me. It's just me doing
Yeah.
a lot of the work and doing all of the artwork and all the sampling. But it's usually about 4 collections a year. So right now I'm just finishing up on this transitional summer fall transition with the Rome 2. And then I have the fall collection coming out, which debuted on the Santa Fe Indian Market runway, the Sawaya fashion show.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited for both. My wallet, maybe not. Just kidding. No, I think it's so worth it supporting other Indigenous designers and people. Thank you so much, Lauren, for being here and for sharing your good medicine on the show. I can't wait to see the next collection, and I can't wait to come back to Santa Fe Indian Market next year too. And hopefully one day collab on some wellness product.
Oh my gosh, we have to. Let's do something. I feel like we're both doing so much within our own realms and our communities. I feel like we could do something magical together. Let's do it.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, we're manifesting.